Every year in fantasy football, there are secret players that fantasy drafters didn't really think they needed, but it turns out they did. This is who it will be in 2024. Starting with Curtis Samuel, who I think is the perfect late round flyer in your fantasy football drafts this year because he's getting a massive upgrade. He's going from the Washington Commanders to the Buffalo Bills. And oh, by the way, if you've been living under a rock for the last month or so, the Buffalo Bills without Stephon Diggs. Now, I don't expect Curtis Samuel to be the number one wide receiver going into the season here. I'm sure they're going to draft a rookie or maybe pull off a blockbuster trade, but that is okay because Curtis Samuel isn't a number one wide receiver. It's not what he should be. He should be a complement to a number one wide receiver, and now he's going to be. And he's going to be that in a much better offense with a much better quarterback in Josh Allen than anything he's ever had in Carolina or Washington or even would have had in Washington this year. Now, no, Curtis Samuel's not going to be a guy that you're probably going to want to set and forget and have in your lineup every single week, but that's okay because he's going outside the top 100 picks. But he's going to be one of those perfect guys where it's a bye week, or you have injuries, or you're just looking for some upside in your flex. He can definitely get that done for you. He's going to be one of those guys that nobody is really on this year and secretly ends up being good in fantasy and helping teams. As is his former teammate, Brian Robinson Jr. His value has definitely taken a hit since they went out and signed Austin Ekeler. And yes, again, if you've been living under a rock, Austin Ekeler is now a Washington Commander. This doesn't worry me too much for Brian Robinson. I mean, it does a little bit because, yeah, he's probably not going to catch as many passes as he could have caught without Ekeler. But he's still likely going to be the lead back here. He's still probably going to get most of the goal line run. And look, Austin Ekeler looked really bad last year. I don't think that was a fluke. I don't think that was his ankle. I just think he's a guy who's hitting the cliff for a running back. It happens. So I think Brian Robinson, while maybe his upside is capped to a degree now because of Austin Ekeler and again because of that pass catching, I still think he has tons of value. And again, a running back going outside the top 100 picks, this is an absolute steal to me. And hey, what happens if Austin Ekeler, who's going to be 29 this year, happens to miss some games? Then there is no competition for Brian Robinson. He's one of my favorite running backs to draft late, outside the top 100 picks that has tons of upside. I'll gamble on him every chance. And I'll also gamble on Dallas Goedert. I get it, last year, a down year for him, but what about the 2 prior years when he was one of the best tight ends in real life and in fantasy? The whole Eagles offense had a down year last year, especially the second half of the season, but even in the first half when they were winning, they didn't look like the same Eagles offense. Remember, offensive coordinator Shane Steichen went to the Colts. Things just weren't the same last year. Well, I think they fixed that because they brought in Kellen Moore, and if nothing else, we know Kellen Moore is great for the passing game, especially in fantasy. Let's not forget, just 2 years ago, Dallas Goedert was a top 5 tight end. Now, I'm not saying Dallas Goedert is going to bounce back to that kind of level, be a top 5 tight end, but he doesn't have to. Going outside the top 100 picks, he's an absolute steal if you just decide to punt tight end, grab Dallas Goedert. Even if he's a top 10 tight end, you're going to be ecstatic that you have him because you were able to get somebody of higher value earlier in your draft and then just get Dallas Goedert, who's going to give you similar production to other tight ends. So in a lot of my leagues, I'm going to secretly be passing on the early tight ends and then just grabbing a guy like Dallas Goedert with one of my last picks. Now, if you're wondering how I can be talking about ADP this early into the offseason, it's because Underdog Fantasy already has drafts in full swing. If you want to go try out a draft for as little as $3, go to UnderdogFantasy.com, sign up using our promo code ENDGAME, and they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Take the free money they give you, try out an Underdog draft, and draft some of these secret players I'm talking about late. Another running back I'm really coming around on, I find myself drafting him more and more in these Underdog drafts or even our mock drafts, is Jerome Ford. Look, I know Nick Chubb's a great running back. He's always been a great running back, but he's 29 years old. He's coming off a devastating knee injury. There's no guarantee he's going to be ready week 1. There's no guarantee he's going to be ready by the middle of the season. And there's no guarantee when he's back he's even going to be good or be a workhorse running back. There are a lot of question marks surrounding Nick Chubb right now. And I know Jerome Ford was somewhat frustrating last year because Kareem Hunt was out there vulturing touchdowns, like doing nothing all game and then falling into the end zone. But Jerome Ford actually had a pretty nice season. He was 13th in targets among running backs, had 9 touchdowns on the season. I really doubt they're going to bring Kareem Hunt back this year. I mean, there is a chance they draft a running back, especially, again, you're looking at Nick Chubb. I'm pretty sure he's on the last year of his deal. He's getting up there in age. They may be looking to the future. But I think Jerome Ford was more than good enough last year. And again, he gives you that pass catching. He gives you that touchdown upside. And we're talking about picks this late, well outside the top 100. He's certainly worth it because he could be the starting running back for the Browns in week 1. Now, everybody is all over the Packers passing game this year. You got Jaden Reed being drafted in like round 5. Christian Watson, I think, is going around like 7 or 8. Romeo Doubs in round 9. But I'm going to pass on all those guys, and I'm just going to take Dontayvion Wicks super late, maybe with my last pick in my drafts. When you look at it last year from weeks 14 to 18, when he actually played over 60% of the snaps in all of those games, he scored double-digit PPR points in 3 of those games and 15 or more in 2 of those games. I also really liked him as a prospect. I liked his profile. I liked his potential. Yeah, he had some work to do, but I liked what I saw from him as a rookie last year in his limited snaps. I think he could take a leap forward in year 2. And look, when you look at this offense, this isn't an offense where you can clearly say he's the number 1, he's the number 2. No, Jordan Love will spread it out. You got 4 good pass catchers here. Well, really 5 if you count Luke Musgrave. Maybe 6 with Tucker Kraft. So why invest those earlier picks on those guys when all of these players are probably going to be very volatile this season, and just take the one that's going dead last among all of them and be okay with that volatility and honestly happy with that volatility, because that's what you're looking for this late. Another prospect I really liked last year was Kendre Miller, one of my favorite running back prospects in last year's draft class. Unfortunately, he hurt his MCL in the college football playoffs and then couldn't really get right, re-injured it in training camp, re-injured it again early in the season, just could never get on the field. But now he heads into year 2 healthy, and when you look at last year in week 18, when he was finally fully healthy and finally kind of got a chance, he actually had a pretty nice game, had 79 total yards and a touchdown despite only getting 14 touches and only playing 24% of the snaps. This guy is a very good runner, and they need that because, look, Alvin Kamara, for as good as he's been in his career, he's 29 years old. He's been terrible the last 3 years when it comes to running the football. Sure, he's still a decent weapon through the air, but on the ground just hasn't been as good. I think we could see this be like back in the days with Ingram and Kamara, with Kendre Miller in that Mark Ingram role. He's younger. He's a better runner at this stage of their careers, and he can handle a workhorse role. He's a big enough running back. So I think Kendre Miller could be the first second down back, with Alvin Kamara being more of a change of pace back this year. And if he is, that's going to be great for his value because, again, going well outside the top 100 picks, really outside the top 150 picks here. And look, what if something happens to Alvin Kamara? Like I said, he's 29 years old. Injuries happen. If he misses time, Kendre Miller is going to be a workhorse running back in this offense. An absolute steal, and he's a total secret in drafts because I guarantee after last season, most of your league mates probably have never even heard of him. Another one of my favorite tight end punts is Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. Had an okay year last year. I mean, nothing special, but he did manage to score 6 touchdowns in 14 games, playing in one of the worst passing offenses in the NFL with some of the worst quarterback play. That's going to change this year because they got the number 3 pick. They're almost certainly going quarterback. Maybe it'll be J.J. McCarthy. Maybe it'll be Drake May. Maybe Jaden Daniels. We're not sure yet. We're going to find out in a couple of weeks here. But either way, it's going to be better than Bailey Zappi or Mac Jones. And when you look at this passing game, as hard as they were trying to get a wide receiver, they didn't. I mean, they brought back Kendrick Bourne, who's recovering from ACL. They still have Demario Douglas, who I do kind of like. That's really pretty much it here. I mean, okay, Juju Smith-Schuster, I almost forgot about him because he's so forgettable. There is a path for Hunter Henry, at least if nothing else, being a massive red zone target in an offense that might actually get into the red zone more than it did last year. So again, if you're just waiting on tight end, you're punting, and let's say somebody else gets Dallas Goedert before you, no problem, grab Hunter Henry. At least he'll have touchdown upside pretty much every week. Now, the Arizona Cardinals offense is one I'm excited about this year. We got a healthy Kyler Murray. We got a new head coach. We may have Marvin Harrison Jr. at wide receiver. But we're talking about late round picks, when we're talking about secret players that your league mates probably don't know about, I like Greg Dortch a lot because even if they do end up drafting Marvin Harrison, or if they trade down and get a guy like Neighbors or Rome Odunze, that's okay. Whoever they draft at wide receiver and the guy they drafted last year at wide receiver, Michael Wilson, they could take turns playing the X, playing flanker, whatever, and Greg Dortch can just man the slot where he's actually very good at. Oh, and again, if you've been living under a rock, Marquise Brown, now a Chief, and Rondale Moore, now an Atlanta Falcon. So there's a path here for Greg Dortch. He's going to be the slot receiver in this offense. And last year, from weeks 11 through 18, when he played at least 65% of the snaps, he scored double-digit PPR points in 4 of those games and 13-plus PPR points in 3 of those games. Now, again, he's not going to be a guy you're just going to want to set and forget in your lineup. He's not going to be some league winner who finishes as a top 10 wide receiver or anything crazy like that. But if you need a bye week fill-in, injuries, you're just looking for upside on a given week in a good matchup, he'll be able to do that for you. He's the type of guy that can eventually be a difference maker for your team, help you win some matchups, help push you into the playoffs, maybe even help you win some matchups in the fantasy playoffs. You never know. for a guy that's basically free in fantasy drafts, well worth it. And then speaking of another guy who's basically free in fantasy drafts, that's Demarcus Robinson of the Los Angeles Rams. From week 13 to 17 last year, he was the wide receiver 12. That's right, he was a top 12 wide receiver. Now the Rams are running it back just like they did last year. A healthy Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay still coaching, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and that's another reason why I really like Demarcus Robinson this year. Cooper Kupp, now into his 30s, hasn't really been the healthiest of guys the last couple of years. 2 injury-plagued seasons. What if that continues? They might need Demarcus Robinson again in this offense. And even if Kupp somehow stays healthy all year this year, he's the perfect number 3. They've been looking for this. Sean McVay's been looking for this guy. Remember, first he tried Allen Robinson. That didn't work. Then they tried Van Jefferson. That didn't work. It looks like they finally found their number 3 wide receiver, a guy who's got tremendous upside. He can score touchdowns. And if Cooper Kupp misses time, he's going to slot in as the clear number 2 target in this offense, which we know is a good offense for fantasy, especially for passing. So Demarcus Robinson, you can get him with one of your last picks, because I promise you, nobody in your league is looking at Demarcus Robinson. So there's some secret players with upside this year that are going to be practically free in your fantasy drafts, but who are some players that are ready to finally break out this year? Find out in this video.